And now what you're doing, when I'm going to pick the story back up here, there's a Huey that's got resupply. So he's got, bullets, probably bullets, water, and food. Maybe at this point, just bullets. And they need to get that gear down to the guys on the ground.
Right. The guys on the ground, the base had been pretty much completely overrun. The friendlies had consolidated in a command bunker complex or defensive dug-in positions at the top of the hill, which was their fire base. When we got the call to cover that Huey, we were told that the guys on the ground were completely out of anti-tank ammo and were almost out of small arms ammunition. And could we cover this Huey in for the resupply?
So here we go, back to the book. The Huey came into a low hover near the command bunker. The crew kicked out the ammo boxes. The helicopter did a hovering turn and took off. I began a sharp left turn so I could continue shooting suppressive fire for him. The enemy opened up on our two Cobras with everything they had. My view left, right, and above and below was filled with tracers. Tim fired continuously, and Tim was Tim was my front seater, my co-pilot gunner in the front seat, working that nose turret while I was firing rockets. Tim fired continuously on those firing at us. We took large caliber hits all over the aircraft. 51s, like I talked about, and 14.5 millimeter rounds came through the cockpit. Hits from small arms always felt something like Jiffy Pop popcorn popping against its tinfoil cover. These seemed like jackhammers slamming into the aircraft, beginning in the rear, working up the side, and then into the cockpit. The tail rotor was shot off, and the engine was shot up. Every system on the helicopter was damaged in some way. Without the tail rotor, the aircraft began to spin. Fuel lines ruptured, and we were burning. I keyed the microphone. This is 3-6, taking fire from 4 o'clock, taking fire everywhere, taking fire, taking hits, going down, Panther going down. The engine quit. The rotor RPM caution light flashed. The audio warning sounded, announcing that my rotor blades were turning dangerously slow. I slammed the collective down hard to auto-rotate. Under optimal conditions, this is a controlled emergency descent. Under these conditions, I could only hope to lessen the severity of the crash. We corkscrewed down in flames. As I wrestled the aircraft, I radioed my wingman, "Flame, you better get in here and get us out quick." There was no answer. They were fighting for their lives. I learned years later that when I called taking hits, Flame had banked his Cobra and fired rockets onto the position shooting at me. As he did so, a big, ugly 51 round came through the cockpit and tore into his chest, high on the left side. Bob took the controls and headed for help, flying from the front seat. My Cobra came down, spinning and burning. It hit the ground hard, nose low on the left side. It bounced back into the air, spun another turn and a half, and crashed. It settled nearly upright. Fire engulfed the cockpit. So, pilots are known for maintaining their composure, right? And I've heard pilots do it. And clearly, you're saying we're taking hits, we're taking fire from everywhere, we're going down, Panther going down. Are you so tracking on controlling the aircraft that you're just completely focused on that the rest of what's happening is a little bit blocked out? Or what? Are you thinking to yourself, I got to survive this crash? Are you not worried about the fact that when you get on the ground, hey, now I'm going to be surrounded by enemy?
Yeah, none of those thoughts are taking place. As I said in an earlier thing that you read, everyone who's not totally insane is scared in combat. Oftentimes that fear comes about after the missions are over at the end of the day when you think back on what you'd been through that day. Thank goodness we got to drink alcohol in Vietnam. I don't know how people survive in war today. I really don't. We got drunk every single night and then went back out the next day and did it again. So there's fear at the end of the day. There's also fear and trepidation to a degree when you first go, like when I described coming across the hill and seeing what that battle at Ben Hill looked like, tracers, stuff all over the place. I mean, you get butterflies in your stomach and you're anxious. But once you go in on that mission and start those gun runs, it's all there's no time, there's no mental space for any of that other thought. There's no mental space for that fear. You just focus on what you have to do and you do it. And the whole thing we just read of getting shot down, though still, I mean, all these years later, I'm sitting here with a red emotional flush in my face, reliving this yet one more time. But no, I don't recall thinking of anything in those moments, but doing that mission, controlling that aircraft, dealing with that emergency situation as best I could, and going through the whole process. I don't even think there was a thought of life or death, or am I going to make it or not make it, or anything. None of that was even there. It's you do what you have to do, and get it done. And then when it all settled in and hit, spun, settled in, crashed, smoke and flames everywhere, the thing begins exploding. Then there's not time for that fear factor then, because then you start dealing with, okay, what do I have to do now to survive this and get out of here?
And so your aircraft's on fire, and I guess you're not sitting around pondering much when your aircraft's on fire and you're stuck and they're trying to get out. You get hung up while you're getting out, by the way.
I did.
So you do get out. You make it away from the bird a little bit, and you end up getting some distance away. You lost your wingman, right? Or sorry, you lost your
my wingman took the 51.
Your wingman took the 51, but Tim, he got out of the aircraft too and took off in another direction.
Yeah, my front seat, Tim Connery. In a Cobra, there's two canopies, one for the front seat, one for the back. The front seat canopy opens to the left. The back seat canopy opens to the right. So we had an intercom conversation. I said, I don't know. I said, let's get out of this thing. That's good enough for now. And he rogered that call, and then he got out his way. I got out my way. I don't know if you had that little vignette of what happened when I was hanging upside down out the aircraft.
Yeah, I do.
That guy was from New England too. Mark Truhan, the advisor on the ground there.
I'll go ahead and.
If you want.
Yeah, inside Ben Het, one of the American advisors, Mark Truhan, watched us get shot down and crash. He saw Tim exit the aircraft. He saw me hanging out of the side of the Cobra, head down with my feet stuck in the cockpit, the helicopter burning. He'd seen a truck driver die in agony in a blazing semi-wreck years before, and had sworn he would not let that happen again. He raised the sights of his M16 rifle to my body. As he began to squeeze the trigger to put me out of my misery, a cloud of smoke billowed from the exploding aircraft. It obscured me from his view. When the smoke cleared, I was gone. And that's something that you found out years later.
Yeah, he got in touch with me. He contacted me and said, I think it was a letter, and said, I was one of the advisors on the ground at Ben Het when you got shot down. I can give you some information about what happened if you'd like to hear it. If you don't, I understand. If you just don't want to even go there. I said, tell me what you know. So he shared that story with me.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So I'm going back to the book. This is the state you're in. The pain in my back was intense. It was broken. The fire had burned the back of my neck. I had lesser burns on my face. My hair was singed. I had pulled a shell fragment out of my ankle. Superficial lacerations covered my face and forehead, bleeding badly. I was a mess, but I was motivated. I wanted to get away. I staggered from the crash site and headed southeast towards Khartoum, as it was getting dark. I had not gone far when I heard helicopters approaching. Cobras came in low, shooting, and you had your little strobe. And so here we go. I held the light over my head, pointed it toward the aircraft. It flashed a few times. The gunner in the lead Cobra opened up on me with his minigun. A stream of tracers came right at me, this is something we learned in Iraq as well. When you fire off a strobe, if someone isn't expecting or isn't looking for it, it just looks like muzzle flash, and anybody that sees it will shoot at it.
We had blue covers that we put on them that supposedly changed the color of it so it wouldn't look like enemy fire, but no. In fact, I ran into that front seater that opened up on me years later at Bentley Hill, and he shared. He said, we were out there flying that mission, and it sure looked like enemy fire. Sorry about that. So here we go back to the book. This is a little bit about your attitude. I was cocksure. If anyone could survive this, it was me. I'd been a Boy Scout. Though I was one of the troublemakers in my troop, I'd learned a lot. I'd backpacked 65 miles through the mountains in 5 days and practiced survival skills. My troubled youth got me suspended from school a number of times, but it also taught me lessons. I learned to street fight, take care of myself. I had boxed, played football, and run track.
I majored in forestry, worked cattle ranches, rode broncs in small rodeos, fought forest fires, worked construction, and was an electrical lineman for Southern California Edison. I remembered a little ditty my mother had taught me. The Lord helps those who help themselves. I knew I could depend on its absolute truth to get me through this. The Lord helps those who help themselves. God, I'll do that. Do all I can. Muster every bit of what's inside me. I'll do my part. I'll do all I can to help myself. So please, please do yours. I need your help. I said it again to myself, drawing comfort and strength. The Lord helps those who help themselves. I would repeat it often as I set my mind to doing all I must to survive.
Yeah. This is interesting going through this in all this detail again, because when I wrote the book, I had to revisit everything in detail like I had not done since it happened to me. I had never gone to this depth of reliving those experiences. And it's tough to think back on that. Indeed, when I was writing this, I'd share some of the writing with my wife when I come to bed late at night. And after I got a few chapters into this, I told her one night, I said, Melanie, what am I doing? This whole thing is a series of unfortunate events. Who's going to want to read something like this? And she told me, she said, Bill, I know the whole story. She said, stick with it, finish this book, because I think that in it there's inspiration, there's motivation for people. It's not just your story. It can help others. And so in that vein, I mean, I say that because it is getting a little emotional as we read through this, and that's fine. But I do hope that some of this is useful and helpful for others. And I grew up going to church as a kid, but I wasn't an overly religious guy. And somewhere around college, I quit going to church altogether. And in the Army, the only time I can remember that I'd been going to church was for memorial services for guys, and that was about it. But if you end up in a situation like this, or I would say any, really, if you think the situation in your life is stressful and is about to overwhelm you, you need some help beyond yourself. And, no matter what, I'm not selling any religion, but I would say whatever your religious beliefs are, you can find a lot of strength in your God, and get close to God, and He'll help you through it. I couldn't have done this by myself. I grabbed a hold of that ditty that my mom gave me. I also grabbed a hold of the 23rd Psalm, and when stuff got really close to being blown to smithereens a few times later on in my captivity, that 23rd Psalm was going over and over again in my mind too. So, yeah, again, not selling any religion, but whatever your spirituality is, you best get comfortable with it if you're going to be in dire straits like this.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're saying, look, I'm going to do everything I can, but I'm going to need some help.
Yep.
And, certainly, when you say that other people, will be able to find, absolutely. I mean, just me reading this, I found all kinds of, not just inspiration, but practical guidance, which, one of the things you just said is practical guidance on, someone that's been through what you've been through. There's so much that everybody else can take away and learn from. And yeah, that's one of them right there. Do what you can, do everything that you can, and then have some faith on the things that you can't control are going to work out your way.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because I'm thinking now as we're talking, and I don't know if we're going to get to that specific part in the book or not, but early on, I think it was the first night, I get B-52 strikes almost landing on top of me, and I'm beginning to feel that am I going to survive this or not? And I think the answer is, I don't know. But in that answer is, I don't know, and so what? I mean, that doesn't matter. That's not important. I may survive, I may not survive. I'm going to do all I can to survive. So I got to the point where this fear of being blown to smithereens kind of went away. And I just settled into, I'll either survive or I won't survive. I can't worry about that. All I can worry about is what can I do to try and set the best conditions to make that survival possible. And I either will or I won't.
One of the similar thing that I always felt was, in Iraq, one of the biggest threats to us was IEDs. Right. And they're random. They're going to hit you or they're not going to hit you. And every time you go outside the wire, there's a chance that it's your day. And, kind of what I told my guys and the way I felt myself was, okay, I know they're out there. We've done everything we can to mitigate the risk. We've done our planning. We've done our drills. We've gathered our intelligence. There's nothing else we can do to control it, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Right.
And I've done everything I can. Like you said, I've helped myself as much as I can. And then after that, it's out of my hands. Yep. And the more you worry about it, like you said, well, does it really matter? I can sit here and worry about it, but it doesn't matter. Got to move forward.
Exactly.